I didn't notice the distance at first. Life had a way of keeping us too busy to see the cracks forming in the glass. Between juggling work, raising 2 kids, and keeping up with the relentless demands of adulthood, our marriage had fallen into a predictable rhythm. It wasn't bad, it was just routine. I'm Ethan, a 37-year-old software engineer. My wife, Natalie, is 35 and works in event planning. We've been married for 12 years and have 2 kids, Lily, who's 10, and Max, who's 7. For the most part, I thought we were happy. Sure, there were times when we argued or felt disconnected, but isn't that just part of marriage? Looking back, I realize how blind I was. It started small, little things that were easy to brush aside. Natalie began staying late at work more often, claiming her team was overwhelmed with a string of high-profile events. When she did come home, she was exhausted, retreating to the bedroom to scroll through her phone instead of joining us for dinner. At first, I didn't question it. She loved her job, and I figured the busy season would pass. But as weeks turned into months, the changes in her behavior grew harder to ignore. She became more protective of her phone, always keeping it face down on the counter or slipping it into her pocket whenever I entered the room. She'd laugh at messages but never tell me who they were from. When I asked, she'd brush me off with vague answers, just work stuff or a meme from Stacy. I wanted to believe her. I really did. One night, as I was folding laundry in the living room, I heard her giggling in the bedroom. It was the kind of laugh I hadn't heard from her in months, the kind she used to reserve for me. Curiosity tugged at me, but I forced myself to focus on the pile of clothes in front of me. Spying on her felt wrong, even if my gut was telling me something wasn't right. A few days later, I finally worked up the courage to confront her. "Nat," I said as we sat down after dinner, the kids already tucked into bed, "you've been distant lately. Is everything okay?" She didn't look up from her phone. "What do you mean?" "I mean, us. You've been working a lot, and I feel like we don't spend time together anymore. Is something going on?" She sighed, setting her phone down. "Ethan, it's just work. We're swamped with this upcoming gala, and I'm stressed. That's all." I nodded, trying to push down the knot of unease in my chest. "I get that, but if you're feeling overwhelmed, you can talk to me. I'm here for you." Her lips curved into a faint smile. "I know you are. I appreciate it." The conversation felt incomplete, but I didn't press further. I wanted to believe her, to trust that she was telling me the truth. After all, she was my wife. The thought of her lying to me seemed impossible. But then came the night that changed everything. It was a Friday, and Natalie had gone out for drinks with the team to celebrate finishing the gala. I stayed home with the kids, putting on a movie for them before tucking them into bed. By 10 p.m., Natalie still wasn't home, and her texts had become sparse. I sent her a message asking if she was okay and got a curt "fine. Be home soon," in reply. When the clock struck midnight, I couldn't ignore the uneasy feeling gnawing at me. I sat on the couch, my mind racing with all the possible explanations for her absence. Had she gotten into an accident? Was she with someone else? The second thought sent a chill down my spine, but I shook it off. Natalie wasn't that kind of person. She wouldn't do that to me. Right? When she finally walked through the door at 1 a.m., I could smell the alcohol on her breath before she even said a word. Her cheeks were flushed, and her eyes avoided mine. "Rough night?" I asked, keeping my tone light despite the weight in my chest. "Yeah," she mumbled, kicking off her heels and heading straight to the bedroom. "I'm exhausted." I followed her. "Natalie, we need to talk." She turned, irritation flashing in her eyes. "Can it wait? I'm tired." "No, it can't," I said firmly. "You were out until 1 in the morning. That's not like you. I need to know what's going on." Her expression softened, but there was something guarded about it. "Ethan, you're overthinking this." I was with my coworkers. That's it. I searched her face for any sign of deceit, but she held my gaze, unwavering. Still, the unease refused to leave me. That night, as she slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling, my mind spinning with doubts and questions I didn't know how to answer. Something was wrong, I could feel it in my bones. But I didn't know how to fix it, or if it could even be fixed at all. The following week, I found myself walking a tightrope between suspicion and denial. Every interaction with Natalie felt like a puzzle I couldn't quite solve. Her laughter seemed forced, her smiles didn't reach her eyes, and the way she avoided my touch made my chest tighten with unease. Still, I told myself I was imagining things. Maybe work really was draining her. Maybe the distance between us was just a symptom of busy schedules and tired nights. But the voice in the back of my mind wouldn't be silenced. It whispered doubts that I was too afraid to voice. On Tuesday night, the kids were asleep, and Natalie was in the shower. As I sat on the couch, my gaze drifted to her phone sitting on the kitchen counter. It was face down, as usual. I stared at it, a war waging inside me. Part of me screamed that looking would cross a line, that I needed to trust her. But another part, the part that had been quietly collecting red flags, whispered that I had a right to know. Before I could stop myself, I stood and picked up the phone. My heart raced as I turned it over. The screen lit up, and a notification appeared, a text from someone named Lila. I knew most of Natalie's friends, but I'd never heard of Lila. My thumb hovered over the message, my pulse pounding in my ears. After a moment's hesitation, I unlocked the phone, Natalie and I knew each other's passcodes, and opened the thread. What I saw made my stomach drop. The messages weren't from Lila at all. The contact name was a cover for someone named Aaron. They'd been exchanging texts daily, their conversations filled with inside jokes, emojis, and a familiarity that made my chest tighten. The messages from earlier that evening were the worst. "Aaron, can't wait to see you again. Last night was amazing. Natalie, it really was. I needed that. You're incredible." My hands shook as I scrolled further. There were no explicit messages, but the tone was unmistakable. This wasn't just a casual friendship. This was something more. I slammed the phone down, the sound echoing through the silent kitchen. My thoughts spiraled, anger and heartbreak crashing over me in waves. How could she do this? After everything we'd built together, after all the sacrifices we'd made for our family, how could she betray me like this? I paced the kitchen, my mind racing with questions I couldn't answer. Should I confront her now? Should I wait and gather more evidence? Should I even give her the chance to explain? When Natalie emerged from the bathroom, her hair damp and her expression relaxed, I froze. She looked at me and frowned. "Ethan. What's wrong?" I wanted to shout, to demand answers, but I couldn't find the words. Instead, I forced a tight smile. "Nothing. Just tired." She didn't seem convinced, but she let it go. "I'm going to bed. Good night." I watched her disappear down the hallway, my hands clenching into fists at my sides. I felt like a stranger in my own home, standing in the wreckage of a life I thought I understood. I needed answers, but more than that, I needed time to think. Time to figure out what to do next. The next day at work, I couldn't focus. Every line of code blurred on the screen as Aaron's messages replayed in my mind. I tried to bury myself in the routine of tasks and meetings, but the weight in my chest refused to budge. By the time I got home, I was exhausted, not from work, but from the sheer emotional toll of pretending everything was fine. Natalie was already home, cooking dinner while Max worked on a puzzle at the dining table. Lily sat nearby, reading a book. It was a picture of domestic normalcy, but it felt like a lie. Every glance at Natalie sent a fresh wave of anger surging through me. Did she think I wouldn't notice? Did she think I was that blind? Over dinner, I tried to act natural, but the words felt forced. Natalie chatted about her day, her smile never wavering, while I nodded and grunted responses. The kids didn't seem to notice, but inside, I was unraveling. That night, as we lay in bed, I decided I couldn't keep quiet any longer. The tension was eating me alive. I turned to her, my voice low to avoid waking the kids. "Nat, we need to talk." She glanced at me, her expression wary. "Okay, about what?" I hesitated, my throat dry. "About us. About what's been going on lately." She frowned, sitting up slightly. "What do you mean?" "You've been distant," I said, my voice trembling with barely contained emotion. "And it's not just work. There's something else, isn't there?" Her eyes darted away, a flicker of guilt crossing her face before she masked it. "Ethan, I told you, it's just been a stressful few months. That's all." "Don't lie to me," I snapped, my voice sharper than I intended. "I saw the messages, Natalie. From Aaron." Her face went pale, and for a moment, she didn't speak. Then she stammered, "You went through my phone." "Yes, I did," I said, my voice breaking. "Because I had to. Because you've been hiding things from me. So don't sit there and act like I'm the one who crossed a line." Her hands trembled as she pulled the blanket tighter around herself. "It's not what you think, Ethan. Aaron is just a friend." "A friend?" I laughed bitterly. "Friends don't send messages like the ones I saw. Friends don't talk about amazing nights together." Her silence was deafening. She looked down at her lap, tears welling in her eyes. "I didn't mean for it to happen." My heart shattered at her confession. The words hung in the air, cutting deeper than I thought possible. "So it's true," I said quietly. "You've been cheating on me." "It wasn't like that," she pleaded. "I mean, yes, we crossed a line, but it wasn't physical. I swear, Ethan. We just talked. He made me feel." "Feel what?" I interrupted, my voice rising. "Feel appreciated. Seen. Because I don't do that for you." Her tears spilled over, but I couldn't stop. The anger, the betrayal, it all came pouring out. "Do you have any idea what you've done? What this does to our family? To me?" "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I didn't mean to hurt you." I stared at her, my chest heaving. "Sorry doesn't fix this, Natalie. Sorry doesn't make it go away." We sat in silence for what felt like an eternity, the distance between us an uncrossable chasm. Finally, I stood, grabbing a pillow from the bed. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice shaky. "I'm sleeping on the couch," I said coldly. "I can't be in here with you right now." As I walked out of the room, the weight of her betrayal pressed down on me, threatening to crush me entirely. I didn't know how we'd move forward, if we could move forward. All I knew was that everything I thought I knew about my wife, my marriage, and my life had been irrevocably shattered. The couch became my new bed for the next few nights. Sleep came in fleeting moments, if at all. Every time I closed my eyes, images of Natalie and Aaron filled my mind, her laughing at his jokes, sending him those messages, and feeling something she no longer seemed to feel for me. It was a torment I couldn't escape. The mornings were a minefield. I could feel the kids watching me, sensing that something was off, but I couldn't bear to explain. Natalie, for her part, avoided me. She busied herself with the kids, her phone, and work, leaving the house earlier than usual and returning late. I wondered if she was with him, but I couldn't bring myself to follow her. Not yet. By the fourth night, I couldn't take the silence anymore. After the kids went to bed, I walked into the bedroom where Natalie was sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at her phone. She looked up as I entered, her face a mix of guilt and apprehension. "We need to talk," I said firmly, shutting the door behind me. I know, she replied softly, setting her phone aside. I've been waiting for you to say something. I crossed my arms, leaning against the door. Then start talking, Natalie. Tell me everything. No more lies. No more half-truths. I need to know what I'm dealing with here. She hesitated, her hands twisting in her lap. It's not what you think, she began. Aaron and I, we didn't sleep together. I swear to you, Ethan. But I won't lie. I developed feelings for him. My stomach clenched. Hearing her admit it out loud didn't dull the sting. If anything, it made it worse. Why? I asked, my voice cracking. Why him? Why now? Natalie sighed, tears glistening in her eyes. I don't know. I didn't mean for it to happen. It started innocently enough, he's part of the team at work. We'd talk during breaks or after meetings. He made me laugh, made me feel special. I closed my eyes, trying to block out her words, but they cut through me like glass. And I don't. It's not that, she said quickly. Ethan, I've been feeling lost for a long time. Like I'm just going through the motions. With you, with the kids, with everything. Aaron made me feel alive again, like I mattered. Her words were like a dagger to the heart. So what? You just decided to emotionally check out of our marriage and latch on to the first guy who paid you attention? It wasn't like that, she protested, but the guilt in her eyes betrayed her. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I never wanted to hurt you. Then why didn't you stop? I demanded. Why didn't you talk to me instead of running to him? She looked away, her silence answering for her. My chest tightened as the reality of her betrayal settled in. This wasn't just a mistake. It was a choice to prioritize her own feelings over the life we'd built together. What happens now? I asked after a long silence. Natalie wiped her eyes. I don't know. I want to fix this, Ethan. I do. But I can't undo what I've done. I need time, I said, my voice heavy with exhaustion. Time to figure out if I can even trust you again. She nodded, her tears falling freely now. I understand. I'll do whatever it takes. But I didn't know if her words were enough. Trust wasn't something you could rebuild with promises. It had to be earned, and I wasn't sure if I had the strength, or the desire, to wait and see if she could earn it. As I left the bedroom that night, I felt a strange mix of sadness and anger. Part of me still loved her, still wanted to believe in the person she used to be. But another part of me, the part that had been shattered by her betrayal, wondered if the woman I fell in love with was gone for good. The days that followed were some of the longest of my life. I oscillated between anger and heartbreak, trying to reconcile the woman I thought Natalie was with the one who had betrayed me. I knew I needed clarity, but every time I thought about delving deeper into her connection with Aaron, my chest tightened. One evening, as the kids were at a neighbor's house for a sleepover, I decided to confront the issue head-on. Natalie was in the living room, curled up on the couch with a mug of tea. She looked up as I entered, the guilt in her eyes as plain as day. We need to set some boundaries, I said, keeping my voice steady. If we're going to figure this out, I need transparency from you. She nodded, her grip tightening on the mug. What do you mean? For starters, I want you to cut off all contact with Aaron. Block his number, avoid him at work, whatever it takes. I can't even think about rebuilding anything with you if he's still in the picture. Her face fell, and I felt a pang of fear. Would she fight me on this? Defend him? Choose him over me? I'll do it, she said quietly, breaking the silence. I already told him it's over. I can block his number if that helps. It's not about what helps, I said sharply. It's about what's necessary. She flinched at my tone, and for a moment, I felt a twinge of guilt. But then I remembered the messages, the laughter, the intimacy she had shared with another man, and the anger flared again. "There's more," I continued. "I need access to your phone. Your texts, your emails, everything. If I can't trust you, I need proof that you're not hiding anything." She hesitated, and for a moment, I thought she might refuse. But then she placed the mug on the table and handed me her phone. "Here," she said. "Take it. Look at whatever you need to." I stared at the device in my hand, unsure if I wanted to open Pandora's box. But I had asked for this, and now there was no turning back. I scrolled through her messages, her emails, her social media. There was no trace of Aaron, no messages, no photos, nothing. Either she had deleted everything, or she truly had cut him out of her life. When I handed the phone back to her, she looked at me with tears in her eyes. "I know I've hurt you, Ethan. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I'm willing to do whatever it takes to fix this." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that she was sincere, that the woman I had fallen in love with was still there, buried beneath the lies and the guilt. But a part of me couldn't shake the doubt, the nagging voice in my head that whispered, "What if she does this again?" "We're not there yet," I said finally. "This isn't something you can fix overnight, Natalie. It's going to take time. And right now, I don't even know if I want to try." Her face crumpled, and she began to cry. I didn't comfort her. I couldn't. The hurt was still too raw, too fresh. Instead, I stood and walked out of the room, leaving her to her tears. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of resolve. I couldn't continue living in limbo, caught between anger and indecision. I needed to take control of the situation, not just for my sake, but for the kids as well. They deserved stability, and I wasn't sure if I could provide that in a house filled with tension and broken trust. I called my best friend, Mike, and asked him to meet me for coffee. Mike and I had been close since college, and he had always been the one person I could count on for brutal honesty. If anyone could help me make sense of this mess, it was him. When I arrived at the cafe, Mike was already there, sipping a black coffee. He looked up as I approached, his brow furrowing in concern. "You look like hell," he said as I sat down. "Thanks," I replied with a weak smile. "Needed to hear that." "Talk to me," he said, leaning forward. "What's going on?" I hesitated, unsure of where to start. But then the words came tumbling out, Natalie's distance, the messages, the confrontation. By the time I finished, Mike was staring at me with a mix of disbelief and anger. "Jesus, Ethan," he said. "I'm so sorry, man. I had no idea." "Neither did I," said bitterly. "That's the worst part. I didn't see it coming." Mike took a long sip of his coffee, his gaze thoughtful. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know," I admitted. "She says she wants to fix things, but I don't know if I can trust her again. And honestly, I'm not sure if I want to." Mike nodded slowly. "Look, man, this isn't something you can decide overnight. But you need to figure out what's best for you, and for the kids. If you think there's a chance to save your marriage, then fight for it. But if you can't get past this, don't let guilt keep you trapped in something that's already broken." His words hit me like a punch to the gut, but I knew he was right. I had to decide what I wanted, not just for myself, but for my family. As I left the cafe, I felt a sliver of clarity. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in days, I felt like I had a direction. Whether it led back to Natalie or away from her, I wasn't sure. But I knew one thing, I couldn't stay in limbo forever. The clarity I'd felt after my conversation with Mike didn't last long. By the time I got home, the weight of the decision before me pressed down like a storm cloud. Natalie was in the kitchen, preparing dinner. Her movements were slow, almost hesitant, as though she were walking on eggshells. And maybe she was. We ate in near silence, the kids chatting about their day while Natalie and I exchanged brief, polite words. It felt surreal, like we were actors in a play, pretending to be a happy family while the foundation of our lives crumbled beneath us. That night, after the kids were in bed, I found Natalie sitting in the living room, a glass of wine in her hand. She looked up as I entered, her expression a mix of guilt and hope. "Can we talk?" she asked softly. I sat down across from her, folding my hands in my lap. "Go ahead." She took a deep breath, setting the glass down on the coffee table. "Ethan, I know I've hurt you. I know I've broken your trust, and I can't even begin to tell you how sorry I am. But I love you. I love our family. And I want to make this right." Her words hung in the air, and for a moment, I didn't know how to respond. I wanted to believe her, to trust that she meant what she said. But the doubt lingered, a constant reminder of the betrayal I couldn't forget. "I don't know if we can fix this," I said finally. "I don't know if I can trust you again." Her face crumpled, tears welling in her eyes. "I understand," she whispered. "But I'm willing to do whatever it takes to try. Therapy, counseling, anything. Just please, don't give up on us." "Therapy," I repeated, the word tasting foreign on my tongue. I hadn't considered it before, but maybe it was worth a shot. If nothing else, it could help me sort through the mess of emotions swirling inside me. "I'll go," I said after a long pause. "But I'm not promising anything, Natalie. This isn't something that gets fixed overnight." "I know," she said quickly. "I'll do whatever you need. I just want a chance to prove to you that I can be better." The following week, we scheduled our first counseling session. The therapist, a middle-aged woman named Dr. Patel, welcomed us into her office with a warm smile. She gestured for us to sit on the plush gray couch, her gaze kind but penetrating. "I'm glad you both decided to come," she said. "Before we begin, I want to set some ground rules. This is a safe space, where both of you can express your feelings without judgment. My goal is to help you communicate and work through the challenges in your marriage. Does that sound fair?" We nodded, though I felt a pang of doubt. Could therapy really help us? Could it undo the damage that had been done? Dr. Patel leaned forward slightly, her notebook in hand. "Ethan, why don't we start with you? Can you tell me what brought you here today?" I hesitated, glancing at Natalie before meeting the therapist's gaze. "I found out my wife was emotionally involved with another man," I said, my voice tight. "It broke my trust. And now I don't know if we can come back from that." Dr. Patel nodded, jotting something down in her notebook. "Thank you for sharing that. And Natalie, how do you feel about what Ethan just said?" Natalie's voice trembled as she spoke. "I know I've hurt him. I know what I did was wrong. I let myself get too close to someone else because I was feeling lost and disconnected. But I want to fix things. I want to rebuild what we had." Dr. Patel asked probing questions, guiding us to dig deeper into our feelings and the underlying issues in our marriage. It was painful, raw, and at times, unbearable. Natalie admitted that she had felt unappreciated and invisible, while I confessed that I had been so focused on work and the kids that I hadn't noticed her slipping away. By the end of the session, I felt emotionally drained but strangely lighter. For the first time in weeks, I felt like we were beginning to understand the cracks in our relationship, not just the betrayal, but the deeper issues that had led us here. Over the next few weeks, we continued therapy. It wasn't a magic fix, far from it. There were moments of anger, sadness, and doubt. But there were also moments of connection, where I glimpsed the woman I had fallen in love with and the life we had built together. Natalie did her part, too. She blocked Aaron on all platforms, avoided him at work, and kept her phone open and accessible. She started putting more effort into our time together, planning date nights and surprising me with little gestures, a home-cooked dinner, a handwritten note. They were small things, but they mattered. For the first time in months, I began to feel a glimmer of hope. Maybe we could fix this. Maybe we could find our way back to each other. But the road was still long, and I knew the hardest part was yet to come, forgiving her, and learning to trust her again. Forgiveness was a mountain I wasn't sure I could climb. Therapy had helped me understand the cracks in our relationship, but understanding wasn't the same as forgiving. Every time Natalie smiled at me or reached for my hand, I felt the weight of her betrayal pressing down like a stone. One night, as we lay in bed, she turned to me. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice barely audible in the dark. "Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive me?" I stared at the ceiling, the question hanging heavy in the air. "I don't know," I admitted. "I want to, but it's hard." She didn't say anything, but I could hear her soft, stifled sobs beside me. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to tell her it would be okay. But another part, the part still raw and wounded, kept me rooted in place. The following morning, I decided I needed space to think. I asked Natalie to take the kids to her mother's house for the weekend, claiming I had work to catch up on. She didn't argue, just nodded and quietly packed their things. When the house was finally silent, I sat on the couch, staring at nothing. I had thought space would help, but instead, it left me alone with my thoughts, an endless loop of doubts, fears, and memories. I remembered the early days of our marriage, how we'd stayed up late talking about everything and nothing. How we danced in the kitchen to our favorite songs, laughing until our sides hurt. How she'd looked at me on our wedding day, her eyes filled with a love I had believed would never fade. And then I thought about Aaron. About the messages, the secrecy, the lies. My chest ached with the weight of it all. I grabbed my phone and called Mike. "Can we talk?" I asked, my voice strained. "Of course," he said. "Come over." An hour later, I was sitting in Mike's garage, the scent of sawdust and motor oil filling the air. He handed me a beer and sat down across from me, his expression serious. "What's on your mind?" he asked. "I don't know if I can forgive her," I said, my voice breaking. "I want to, but every time I think about what she did, it kills me." Mike nodded, his gaze thoughtful. "Forgiveness isn't about forgetting, Ethan. It's about deciding that the person who hurt you is worth the effort to try again." "But what if she's not?" I asked, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "What if I never trust her again?" "Then that's your answer," he said simply. "But if you're here, still talking about this, then maybe part of you still thinks she is." His words hit me hard, and I sat in silence, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. I knew he was right. Forgiveness wasn't something Natalie could earn, it was something I had to give. But was I ready to give it? When Natalie returned with the kids on Sunday evening, I was waiting for her. The kids ran inside, chattering about their weekend, while she lingered by the door, her expression uncertain. "We need to talk," I said, gesturing toward the living room. She followed me, sitting on the edge of the couch as though bracing herself for bad news. "What is it?" she asked, her voice trembling. I took a deep breath, the words forming slowly in my mind. "I've been thinking a lot about us. About everything that's happened." She nodded, her hands twisting in her lap. "I want to try," I said finally. "I want to try to forgive you, to rebuild what we had. But it's going to take time. And I need you to be patient with me." Tears filled her eyes, and she nodded quickly. "Of course. I'll do whatever it takes, Ethan. I promise." "I'm not making any guarantees," I warned. "This isn't going to be easy. But I think we owe it to ourselves, and to the kids, to try." She reached for my hand, her grip tentative but firm. "Thank you," she whispered. "I won't let you down." As I sat there, holding her hand, I felt a flicker of hope. It was faint and fragile, but it was there. And for the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other. The decision to try again wasn't the end of the story, it was just the beginning of a long, grueling process. Forgiveness wasn't a switch I could flip, it was a conscious choice I had to make every single day. And some days were harder than others. We started small. Natalie and I went back to therapy, not just for our marriage but individually as well. I needed to understand my feelings, to unpack the anger and pain that had consumed me. Natalie had her own work to do, confronting the choices she had made and the reasons behind them. Therapy sessions were intense, often leaving us emotionally drained but strangely lighter. We talked about things we had never discussed before, her feelings of invisibility, my tendency to retreat into work, the cracks in our communication that had allowed distance to creep in. It wasn't easy, but it felt necessary. Each session peeled back another layer of the wounds we had both been carrying. At home, we worked on rebuilding trust. Natalie was transparent about her schedule, her phone, and her interactions at work. She even volunteered to switch teams to avoid any contact with Aaron. I hadn't asked her to do that, but the gesture meant something. It showed she was committed to repairing what she had broken. There were moments when doubt crept back in, threatening to undo the progress we had made. Like the time I found her on her phone late at night, her back to me. My heart raced as I imagined the worst, but when I approached her, I saw she was scrolling through Pinterest, looking up ideas for our anniversary. "It's nothing," she said quickly, sensing my tension. "I was just—" "I know," I interrupted, forcing a smile. "It's okay." But it wasn't always okay. Some nights, the anger surged back with a vengeance, and I had to remind myself why I was fighting for this. I'd retreat to the garage or the backyard, staring at the stars and asking myself if I was doing the right thing. The answer wasn't always clear, but one thought kept me grounded: Natalie was trying. She was doing everything I had asked of her and more. Our turning point came one Saturday afternoon, months after the affair had come to light. We had taken the kids to the park, and as they played on the swings, Natalie and I sat on a bench, watching them. "Do you ever think about leaving?" she asked suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. Her question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" She looked down at her hands, twisting her wedding ring nervously. "I mean, do you ever wonder if it would have been easier if we just ended it?" I considered her words carefully. "Sometimes," I admitted. "There are days when it feels like too much. But then I think about the good times, the life we've built, the family we've created. And I realize I don't want to throw that away." She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "Neither do I. I'll never stop being sorry for what I did, Ethan. I know I hurt you in ways I can't take back. But I'm so grateful you're giving us a chance." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I reached for her hand, holding it tightly. "We're not there yet, Natalie. But we're getting closer." Over the next few months, things slowly began to feel normal again, or at least, a new version of normal. We started going on date nights, rediscovering the spark that had drawn us together all those years ago. We laughed more, talked more, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I began to feel like we were partners again. There were still challenges, of course. Trust wasn't something that came easily, and there were moments when old wounds resurfaced. But each time, we faced them together, leaning on the foundation we were rebuilding piece by piece. One night, as we sat on the couch watching a movie, Natalie leaned her head against my shoulder. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" I asked. "For not giving up on us," she replied. "For believing we were worth saving." I looked down at her, my heart swelling with a mix of emotions. "You're the one who's been doing the hard work, Nat. I'm just trying to catch up." She smiled, her eyes shining with something I hadn't seen in a long time: hope. In the months that followed, our marriage wasn't perfect, but it was stronger. The cracks were still there, but they no longer felt like a threat. Instead, They were a reminder of what we had overcome, a testament to the resilience of two people who refused to let go. Forgiveness, I realized, wasn't about erasing the past. It was about choosing to move forward, one step at a time. And as I held Natalie's hand and watched our kids run around the backyard, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. We had survived the storm, and though the scars remained, they were a part of our story. A story of pain, yes, but also of healing. A story of second chances. A story worth telling.